Marvel is taking over my life. I'm a DC guy at heart. Batman and his villains in particular will always be peak comic fiction. The Dark Knight movies are amazing. Gotham is low-key the single best live-action hero show out there. Highly recommend Gotham. The villain portrayals in it are top tier. But Marvel over the past decade has just been outputting way too much good stuff. Not all bangers, but plenty, across movies, shows, and games. And right now I'm immersed in several of their projects. I'm back into Marvel Snap, their lane-based card game that's super simple and streamlined, so I'm playing that every day. Then we also just had the Marvel Rivals beta, which is their answer to Overwatch. That was pretty good. And I jumped back into Marvel's Midnight Suns because I never finished it, and it's one of the most underrated games ever. On the movie and show side, I recently got Disney Plus, so now I'm doing the classic MCU pilgrimage, watching every cinematic universe property in chronological order according to its place on the timeline. I've seen probably half the movies sporadically over the last 10 years, but now I'm going to get the true timeline experience and fit them all into the overarching narrative. I'm 3 deep so far, still early on. You start with the first Captain America movie, then there's this 15-minute Agent Carter mini-sode thing, and then the last thing I watched was Captain Marvel. So I thought I'd chronicle my experience through random stream of consciousness episodes because I want to talk about all the things I watch and get little synopses on them and my thoughts throughout. But yeah, Marvel is basically the only thing on my mind lately, and DC just refuses to compete, pushing out bad movies and games like it's on fucking purpose. But let's get started with Captain America, the First Avenger. This movie came out in 2011, and I believe was the last solo movie to happen before the first Avengers movie in 2012, because they had already done Iron Man, the Hulk, and Thor. So other than Hawkeye and Black Widow, who don't get their own shit till later, Captain America is our last spotlight before the gang teams up for the first time. Just to be clear, there are other Marvel movies happening during this time period, but they're not a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, the specific connected timeline that these movies and shows happen in. Like, the X-Men and the Fantastic Four movies and Venom and whatnot aren't included in the MCU. They're their own thing, happening in different universes. It's not all connected, so I'm just going to talk about what is, according to Disney Plus's own specific category of the complete MCU timeline. So how did Captain America come to be Captain America? Well, the movie starts off in the 30s or 40s during World War II, and Steve Rogers, soon to be Captain America, is a scrawny, scrappy little midget who is so desperate to join the army that he enlists multiple times under false identities after he keeps getting rejected for looking like he has polio. You can tell they CGI'd the actor Chris Evans' face onto like an 8th grade boy's body. It looks unnatural. There's scenes with his shirt off, you're like, who left their toddler unattended? His friend Bucky, who becomes a real character way later in the timeline, is a soldier, and Steve would do anything to join his friend on the front lines, outside of going to the gym, apparently. Like, you want to enlist so bad, just lift weights and do sit-ups for a month, instead of being aggressively malnourished. He's like Oliver Twist at the recruitment office begging, "Please, sir, may I have some war?" He even ducks out of a double date night with Bucky and 2 girls Bucky has procured for them for the evening to go try and enlist again. Like, dude, this man got a woman who definitely doesn't know how short you are to put herself out there on a blind date with you, and you're like, I would do anything to go overseas and get shot right now. So at the office, this German scientist clocks Steve and reveals he knows about his enlistment fraud, but says he has a special program he might want him for and allows him to get stamped and actually go to basic training, where he proceeds to be just the worst at everything. It's a true Mulan montage of failure. Not running as fast as the other guys, just looking generally not impressive the whole time, until halfway through a long-distance run, the platoon goes up to this little flagpole with a flag on it, and the leader's like, "Nobody's ever brought down that flag. Anyone who does it gets to ride the rest of the way back in the car with Agent Carter," who is a woman from some agency that all the dudes are like, "Yowza" for. So they all try to climb the pole and fail, but Steve, who is still lagging behind, unhitches or unfastens something, and the whole pole falls over, to where he just picks up the flag, hands it to the leader, and wordlessly gets in the car. It's basically cheating, but also the rules of engagement were never established, so it's the type of thing where someone looks at that and goes, wow, he's thinking outside the box. Mulan is still better for actually climbing her shit, though. The scientist talks to the sergeant, a word that spellcheck is not letting me get away with despite numerous guesses, and the sergeant is adamant about Steve being the wrong choice for the super soldier program because he's scrawny and sucks ass, favoring a more buff soldier in the platoon instead, who is good at all the training. But the scientist maintains that Steve's heart is the reason why he wants him, so he can maintain the goodness in him and be a savior. Basically, if the Keyblade was a Marvel weapon, it would choose Steve Rogers. A scene pops up soon after that demonstrates this, where the sergeant tosses a dummy grenade grenade near the group of soldiers and shouts, "Grenade!" And Steve is the only one who takes the initiative to land on it and use his body to potentially cover the blast and save the rest of the group, while the golden boy the sergeant likes just cowers behind a car. It proves Steve is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect people, which is kind of funny when he's going to be spending the rest of the MCU watching Iron Man do that shit repeatedly instead. So fast forward a bit, and Steve is getting his super soldier serum on, transforming from a water boy into a tight end with tighter abs. He has increased speed, strength, stamina, basically an all stats upgrade with a +2 bonus to looks maxing. The scientist lives just long enough to see his work a success before an infiltrated German spy from an evil Nazi organization called Hydra assassinates him and runs off, with Steve and his newfound powers in hot pursuit. Hydra is Marvel's idea of Hitler's weapons research and experimental tech development programs. Like, what if the Fuhrer was trying to build guns that could vaporize people? I mean, he probably was, I don't know. But in Marvel, Hydra succeeds, and their leader, Red Skull, who is a guy with a red skull who is also a super soldier, has grander plans to take over the world with Hydra and break off of Hitler's chain, even disintegrating some of his people when they get mad at him for making random shit instead of what Hitler wants. But back to the chase, it ends with the dude holding a child hostage before throwing him in the river to make Steve waste time saving him while the spy runs off, but Steve looks down in the water, the kid's just floating there like, "I can swim!" So that distraction failed. The spy gets caught in the end, and while Steve Rogers is excited to actually go do super soldier stuff now, he is instead shoehorned into becoming the Broadway arm of the recruitment effort, doing shows in his new Captain America costume with sexy patriotic lady dancers, advertising the conflict in a cheesy way to secure more investment funds for the war effort and encourage more people to enlist. He goes city by city, basically cosplaying as Uncle Sam, until he finally gets the opportunity to do a show for actual troops. It goes poorly. The troops have literally just lost a battle where a lot of their fellows were captured, and they are not in the mood to fuck with a guy wearing blue tights giving a speech you'd see at a middle school auditorium. They clearly don't think he's a real soldier, and it's valid because he hasn't been on a real mission yet. Captain America goes to the sergeant, tries to get him to approve a mission to rescue the troops that were taken captive, but the sergeant's like, nah. But Steve finds out that his best friend Bucky, who he hasn't seen since before Steve joined the army, is potentially one of the captured dudes, so he goes anyway, with Agent Carter securing a small plane for him to leap out of behind enemy lines. The mission is successful, but he finds Bucky in a room with a few other people who have clearly been experimented on with a similar super soldier formula at the hands of Hydra's top scientist, Arnim Zola. Bucky seems okay, though, so they bring everyone back, and then a group of them start going on more missions to destroy other Hydra labs that Steve saw on a map while he was in the first one. It culminates with a mission to kidnap Zola on board a train traveling high up in the mountains, but during it, Bucky is knocked out of the train and falls 1,000,000 feet to his presumed demise. Steve Rogers loses his best friend, but they succeed in capturing Zola. Sometime later, Captain America fights Red Skull on his giant aircraft over possession of the Tesseract, which is a small blue cube of pure energy that can power anything forever, essentially, and is the key to creating the next level of superweapons and whatever else an evil scientist or greedy government could think of. This is an object that is at the center or background of multiple other conflicts in the MCU in the future, but I just want to point out something that pisses me off. In this movie, the Tesseract can't be touched or stored by normal means, because it will burn through any material that comes into contact with it. This is shown several times over the course of this movie, with the final straw being the fact that during the fight with Red Skull, it gets knocked onto the floor and burns right through the ship floor and drops into the ocean. In later movies, you will see motherfuckers pick this shit up with gloves or store it in a goddamn lunchbox. It even gets eaten by a cat. An alien cat, but still. Its corrosion effect just gets retconned and nobody ever talks about it. Anyway, after Steve defeats Red Skull, his ship is off the coast, headed for New York or somewhere with a bunch of missiles or a nuke or something set to automatically launch or detonate when it gets within shooting distance, so Steve has to sacrifice himself by crashing the ship into the ocean so nobody blows up but him. He's on comms with Agent Carter the whole time, who by now are in love and whatnot, and she has to deal with the fact that he's about to die super heroically. He starts talking to her about the date they never got to go on, how he wants her to teach him how to dance, and then the comm gets cut off mid-sentence as he crashes, while Carter is now very sad. The movie ends, and there's a little post-credit scene where people who have been scouring the general area the ship went down finally unearth some of the wreckage and find Captain America encased in a block of ice. Only issue? It's 75 years later. Dude, there's no way in hell it takes that long to find a giant submerged frostbitten aircraft. They found the Tesseract like the next day because of its energy signature. And though it fell out of the ship a good 10 minutes before the crash, that's still decently nearby. Have Howard Stark, Iron Man's dad, who was also in this movie, I just never mentioned him, have him invent some airborne metal detectors or something that detects super soldiers. That dude had his whole life to put his thinking cap on and came up with nothing. Even if you assume the super soldier is dead, is a super soldier. You want to recover that body before someone else stumbles upon it. Modern update, I wrote the first half of this summary weeks ago and then just kind of sat on it after I watched a few other MCU movies that sort of took over that space in my brain. Since then, I have been binging hella, and I'm currently on Avengers Infinity War. I think it would have been cool to do full summaries on every MCU thing individually, but I already didn't, and now I'm too deep in to go back and remember all this stuff from the beginning. So if I revisit Marvel in Stream of Consciousness, it'll probably be a lot more broad and succinct. There's still more I want to talk about, though, like the fact that I found the movies decently more enjoyable now that I know a lot more Marvel characters thanks to Marvel Snap. A new chick shows up in a movie, and even when they don't expressly name her, I can use context clues to be like, dude, that's Agent 13. Just more obscure characters or characters I didn't know were established in the comics, like Claw from Black Panther. The first time I watched Black Panther when it came out, I thought that dude was just a generic weapons dealer who happened to have an arm cannon that they called Claw because his last name is Claw. But no, that's a real villain whose villain name is Claw. I thought they just made that dude up for the movie because they needed a weapons dealer. Stuff like that just makes it more fun. Anyway, I'd give the first Captain America a 7 or 8 out of 10. I thought I'd be bored rewatching it, but there's so much I've forgotten, so much I have new context for. I'll talk broadly about some of the other movies next time. That's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos and look for Stan Lee cameos, and I'll see you guys next time.